Back from Oklahoma City, I wanted to give you my opinion on the Miller Edge TruGuard Retro-Reflective Photo Eye.
So the Miller Edge TruGuard Retro-Reflective Photo Eye, model number TG-R-K10, is one of those things I picked up. And I talked with Katherine and Kevin about some of my thoughts about the bracket and stuff like that, and they were real receptive. I'm going to go over the production model that I have here, and I'll tell you what some of my thoughts or concerns were about that. It looks like your basis retro-reflective photo eye. You may have seen that similar form factor in different photo eyes. It says it comes with a 6-foot long cable, and it does. Thank you, Jesus. People do not understand how big of a deal that actually is right there. You could very well add an extra 15-20 minutes in labor to put in a box, a 1/2-inch fitting conduit, another 1/2-inch fitting, and then make that junction here. And because this is an exterior direct burial UV protected jacket, these are really a pain in the butt to get into. It does look like it has a ripcord, either that or it actually has a cotton filled insulator in there to prevent water from soaking up in there if water does get past that jacket, but I don't think you'll have to worry about that. And second of all, this needs to go in conduit anyway, so that's actually going to protect the outside of the jacket. But this is a real heavy duty jacket, and sometimes that'll take a little bit of time to splice that back, and then you got to make sure that you didn't damage the wires. So having a 6-foot cable on there is actually a pretty good deal. It's one of the reasons why I like some other photo eyes, and that's if it's not modular. In this case, it's not. You got the cord that you've got, and that's it, which is kind of a cool thing because you don't have to worry about necessarily a fitting on this, which could easily save you $6 or $7 if you had to mount it to a fitting. But you could still run conduit just directly up to the bottom of it, and then when you put your conduit in there, at the bottom of that, cut just a little bitty groove or drill a pre-drill hole. That way, if water does get in there, it leaks out. Because again, it's not about preventing water from getting in there, because all conduit gets water in there. If you've ever taken one of my classes, that's what I teach. It's about protecting the cable itself, and that's why they probably went with a heavy duty cable. And the fact that they probably do intend this on being installed without conduit. So I get it. That's the format that it looks like. And like I said, you may have seen that before. However, this bracket is kind of unique. So it's got a couple of different ways that it can be mounted. So first of all, if you've got a guidepost, and let's pretend this keyboard's a guidepost. So your gate operator is somewhere in this vicinity right here, and it's right next to your guidepost. So if you mount it like that, then your up and down, you really don't have as much control over in some brackets, with the exception of this one, because you could see that it's slotted here. So if you were to mount it like that, you could still go up and down, and then obviously with these slotted grooves, you have a little bit of left and right. So I think that that is pretty kosher for that. One of the things I didn't seem so excited about is it gets you further away from the gate. So I would have liked to have it to where it could mount a little bit closer to the post, but we'll see. Maybe there are some provisions in there that I just didn't see right off the bat. Based on what I see, that's the only way that you can mount it. If you were trying to mount it close to a post like this, then you would have to come up with some kind of bracket off that post. And then if you will, you still have the same movement. You have up and down, and then you have a little bit of left and right by screwing that screw in first, and then this one, leaving it a little loose until you get your adjustment and tighten it down. So the bracket is probably a standard, you know, for a lot of people to have this type of bracket. I would like to see it anodized, preferably black. When you bend this like this, typically you use a lubricant, and if you've got to paint this, in this particular case, I would paint this, you got to sand it first to, one, get that lubricant off of there, and then two, to make sure there's a good surface to adhere to. So I think the bracket has quite a bit of potential. I just am thinking of mounting it in this orientation. So let's just call this a vertical orientation. I'm glad that I've got movement, you know, left to right, but I can't mount it any other way than this. And then if I were to say that this is the front of the guidepost right here, so this is a 4x4 guidepost, and the gate goes like this, if I don't have enough room to mount it on the side post, how do I mount it here? So I think with just a little bit engineering in the bracket, I think there could potentially be another half a dozen or so different types of mount. But this is to the standard of all the other mounts out there for this style of photo eye that I've dealt with, and the fact that I've always had to weld a plate or something else in order to mount it to. I'm gonna power it up just so we can see the LEDs, how bright they are. Not gonna get too detailed in the wiring here, but it's different than a scheme that you would probably see here in the United States. Most likely a European thing, where you have brown and blue, if I'm correct, as your power, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's polarity sensitive. And getting with power, I know that the DC voltage is different than the acceptable AC voltage. I believe DC is like 12 to 40 and AC is like 24 to 48, something along those lines. But you need to make sure that you have the appropriate power. There's probably some boards and stuff out there that still only have 12 volt AC, so you'll need to either rectify that or put another power supply on there, which this does not come with, which is common, because in this particular instance, where you probably only have a 40 or 50 milliamp current draw, pulling that off the board's not a big deal. And then if you have a solar installation, running it through the appropriate shunt in order to make sure that it's not drawing current all the time. That'll power it here in a second. I'll try not to blow it up, and then that just leaves pretty much the reflector. So I have seen this style of reflector before. I went ahead and mounted the reflector into this. One thing that I found interesting that I just like for cosmetics, it serves no functional purpose whatsoever, is that the back of the reflector is black. So the trim ring around it is black as well too, which makes like no difference whatsoever, but that's not very common. This screw that's in here, I wish it was a little bit, I'm looking at the side like you could see that. This screw, I wish it was a little bit longer. I think I've already stripped it out, but it's only like a 1/4 inch, and it doesn't have a fitting in there where it screws into like a thread. It's like a self-tapper into that plastic. And then this style of housing, I wasn't gonna take this off. This style of housing, I'm not against. I just think that it takes too long to install. And this is actually different than what's actually in the manual. In the manual, you have slotted holes here. So if you have to turn it like that or get it to where this part, the part that points up, is directly vertical, then you would have a little bit of movement, and you could probably just do one screw here, one screw here. But if you can, I'll just let you look at the back, because it's basically the same idea. In the back, you could see that there's no slots, it's just a single hole. Here's that screw. It's not that long. I'm gonna put it in here again just to see if I did strip it. Yeah, so I've already stripped it out. So anyways, you need a longer screw in there. But what I would like to see is just a hole here and then no holes back here. I want to have as few holes in the back. That way I have less amount of dirt and grime that's sitting back here full time, because the reflective part of it, the polarized reflective part of it, is super, super thin, and it's right behind here. So you don't know what kind of chemicals might be in the stain or something like that that might deteriorate that over time. So it could eat through it, but I don't want to see that. I just want one hole right in the middle, and then having it offset around the whole photo eye would actually be nice. So in this case, just having this part stand up and not have this stand up, so it would mount flush in there, but there'd be no debris, dirt and debris and water collecting in there, or chemicals from the stain of the wood or paint or something like that that would possibly deteriorate that. And then it comes with another bag of screws. I think the TruGuard's got a couple of great things going for it. Heavy duty wire that's 6 foot long, a bracket depending upon how you mount it, which is flexible, because they did pay attention and put slots here, and then they put slots here, so you get your orientation like that, and then you get your orientation up and down. I think the photo eye reflective cover, as you can see, already busted through that. One last thing, let me power this up and I'll show you how bright the LEDs are. Why that's an issue is because I want to stand 15 feet away and see if it's aligned. If I've got to get close to it, or I've got to duck and dodge and see all that stuff, costs me time, which costs me money. So at the end of the day, the person that pays for the property is a person that's gonna pay for my service. So I wanna keep that cost as low as possible. I'll take my bench power supply right now, I'll put it on 12 volts, and I'll turn it on. I'll see what the current draw is, and then we'll go from there. So like I said, I just got back from Oklahoma, where I use my laptop quite a bit. So that's why I was using this keyboard as a demonstration, is because laptop's running just a tad bit slow. So I'm gonna upgrade to SSD. Found a 2 terabyte on sale for $100. And then I'm gonna put another 8 gigabytes of RAM. So that'll bring this up to 16. So maybe some light video editing or something like that I can do actually in the field when I'm going to these expos and stuff like that. So you have to forgive the mess. Got all my mail from the mailbox after a couple weeks, and I got a bunch of magazines and a bunch of promotional stuff that I got to go through. So let's set up this power supply and then we'll see how bright the photo eye is. So as you can see, it's polarity sensitive for DC and it is not polarity sensitive for AC. So positive is brown, negative is blue. I have double checked my wiring. So we got blue and negative, brown and positive. And I went ahead and set, before I connected this, I went ahead and set my power supply to 12.8 volts, which is probably what you would find in most solar installations or most automatic gate opener installations where it's running full time off the battery, i.e. off the board. So let's go ahead and see what we got. We've got a 10 milliamp current draw. That sounds about right. I mean, it's not showing any current draw right now. So in standby, it's drawing next to nothing. So let's activate the relay and see what we get. 30 or 40 milliamps is what we expect, and I'm not gonna worry about a couple hundredths of a milliamp. That's fine. So you know the current draw is pretty low. And then now, see how bright those lights are. That's good enough. It's kind of hard to see on the camera, but that's good enough for me. So it's normally closed. One, it's important because it probably would have to be that in order to be UL. They won't have a normally open position on there. If having that on there immediately makes it non-UL, but I know in order for it to be UL, it's going to have to be monitored. So that's why you have the 10K monitor mode, and then you have normally closed. So like on an all-o-matic, be normally closed. On a 10K, maybe you might find that on some other gate operator, who knows. It seems like it's hitting its specs with a 30 milliamp current draw, but that's important because it's normally closed. If you're running solar and you don't run it through a shunt, I think you're going to have a big surprise if they go away on vacation for a couple weeks. Let's go ahead and run this thing up to maximum voltage I got here. So this should be 30 volts if I'm correct. I think that's the max of this. So looks like it's still working. DC voltage is 30 volts. And the higher voltage you go, the lower current draw, so you're only looking at 10 milliamps. So maybe on a 24 volt system, you might not draw as much current. All right, interesting product. A couple of things to get tweaked here and there, and I think that would be a good photo eye to carry on your service truck.
All right, stop. Petty time. So if anybody has ever watched one of my videos and followed me for any length of the time, you will know that some stuff I am very, very petty about because it affects me directly, and I like to point it out to other people just in case you're thinking about some stuff along the same lines and you would like that third party opinion. And for me, sometimes that's just as valuable, the small stuff when you talk about a product, as it is the big stuff. Does it work? What's the warranty? Oh, and by the way, 2-year warranty on the TruGuard. So here it is, petty time. This box is too fucking big. Photo eyes should be in a box that is that size by that size, and that's it. So you've got another probably 60%, 50% more than what you actually need. You know, you're talking about these 3 things, or 4 things. I'm a gate operator technician, I'm not a mathematician. 2 of these things fit inside each other. That's it. That's all we're talking about. Bag of screws. The box should not be any bigger than that. I get a big box like this right now in my truck. It can't go in any of the boxes, any of the pull-out shelves that I have for this type of item. And I like to keep all of my sellable goods right next to each other. That way, when I'm out there talking to a customer and I'm changing the dip switch settings or the remote, or I'm putting stickers on there for marketing or whatever the case may be, I've got everything right in front of me. And then also on top of that, for inventory times, it's a lot easier just to go to 1 spot or 2 spots in the truck where you have inventory. So me being petty, this is too big of a box. You can see the size that they actually need. I don't care about the environment and all that stuff. I'm just simply saying smaller box would be a lot better. I could easily stock 2 on my truck as opposed to that size.